Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. I am a big believer in polling when it comes to analyzing politics, but I'm at the same time somebody who does counsel caution when taking one pollster's numbers as being concretely accurate. In this election cycle, I have had to discount a lot of pollsters that I just no longer trust, at least for this election. Doesn't mean that they're trying to make up numbers, but some of them might be. At the very least, it means that their samples aren't under control, which means that they're picking up a lot of overly excited activist liberals, and they're not picking up enough average Canadians when they're asking them who they're voting for. Let's put it this way. When Pierre Poilievre, at the opening of this federal election, could have a rally of 2,500 people, and then 2 days later, he has another 3,000 people in Hamilton as we speak, and he can basically recreate at least a rally of 1,500 people in any given riding in this country. I don't believe Angus Reid when he says that the Liberals are currently at 45% in his sample and the Conservatives are at 37 or 38. That's just not an election that's ever happened in Canada, where the Conservatives used to be ahead by 25 points, and now they're behind by 8. And in fact, I didn't believe Angus Reid when he said the Liberals were only at 16% in December. At the time, I said, that looks really bad for the Liberals. At the same time, I don't actually think they're all the way down at 16%, 5 points behind the NDP, because I think it's just a bunch of people who are emotionally fed up with Trudeau and they're no longer taking the polls, which means the Liberal sample has slipped hard. This is what Nick Nanos is showing right now in Nanos's poll. I think this is far more realistic, so I'm adding them to at least the category that we can tentatively trust to at least be attempting to get it accurate and is trying to do sampling well. In his poll, he actually shows Trump and US relations as the top issue for most Canadians at 31.2% of the population, rating it as the top issue. It is distantly followed by the economy and jobs at 17%. And even in this poll, which is great news for the Conservatives are ahead by 3 points and, in fact, are actually starting to widen their lead again. This is exactly what I've been predicting is going to happen, and I think that we are going to see this reflected also in what innovative research finds as well as abacus data. But one point I want to talk about before I move on to some other stats I want to show you is that pollsters do get things wrong. Whether it's because they are attempting to get it wrong or it's just because their sampling sucks, it happens a lot. It doesn't mean that we don't trust polls, it just means that we have to look at the poll and say, is this at all realistic to real life? Don't just say, well, none of my friends are voting liberal, so why are they even above 25%? Just look around on social media, look around in real life. What are people talking about at the coffee shop? The liberals are definitely increasing their vote share these days, but I don't think they're exactly leading the conservatives by 5 points. I don't think they're, in fact, leading at all. I think there's just a lot of artificial excitement. And a little data point I want to use to back this up is the Saskatchewan provincial election. I'm, in fact, borrowing a point that Frank Vaughn made on his YouTube channel because it was a very good point. That look at these polls done by Insightrix, Main Street, Liaison, Research Co., Forum Research. Look at this. A 3% lead for the Saskatchewan NDP. Oops, sorry, end up scrolling up there. Research Co. had them a 2 ahead. Liaison had them 3 ahead. Main Street had them 4 ahead. Insightrix had them 5 ahead. So, how much did the Saskatchewan NDP beat the Saskatchewan Party by? Oh, well, in fact, they lost. They lost by 11.9%. The Saskatchewan Party won the popular vote by 11.9% over the Saskatchewan NDP, when a lot of the pollsters were showing the Saskatchewan NDP winning the popular vote by sometimes upwards of 3, 4, 5 points. That's nuts. That is just negligence. They may have been even attempting to be accurate. And I think that Saskatchewan tends to actually have very, it's a harder population to poll. I guarantee if they were postal code matching their polls, they would have found out that they were mostly polling people in Saskatoon and Regina. And that's why it looked that close, in fact, with the NDP leading. Because what farmer, and there's a lot of farmers in Saskatchewan, what farmer riding his combine is going to pick up a phone and take a 15-minute polling call with you if you're doing in depth, or even pick it up for 30 seconds? He doesn't care. Your plumber does not care. The electrician in the middle of a job is not going to step down his ladder in somebody's house and say, "Oh, of course I got 3 minutes to take a call." They are going to ghost you. And that is what I think so many pollsters in Canada, in a certain sense, are willingly doing. They know they're oversampling urban areas and they don't really care. Ecos and Frank Graves are the most obvious example. I don't think Frank Graves is literally just typing in whatever numbers he wants. He knows his sample looks like a downtown Starbucks lineup and he doesn't give a crap. And so that's why I like abacus data. That's why I like innovative research. That's why I like uh, at least Nanos for the time being. I'd like to see them perform over the long run. And again, if they show the Conservatives ahead by 10 points tomorrow, I'm not going to believe that. That's not realistic to this election. It's a tight election that I believe the Conservatives are leading by a bit. So now let's just jump over as well to some other numbers here that actually demonstrate the weakness of the Liberals, even in these polls that are showing unrealistic numbers for the Liberals. I've just mentioned Angus Reid before. They showed the Liberals all the way at 16% in December, and now they're at 45% now. In fact, somehow, like greatly ahead of the Conservatives. This is from the Angus Reid poll. It demonstrates that what we probably are just seeing is a lot of urban default liberals being polled that are pushing up the liberals' numbers. But even when you ask those people, how firmly are you voting liberal? It's not actually that firm. Look at this. So dark blue is very committed voters. Fairly committed voters are light blue. Light red is not very committed, and red, like dark red, is not committed at all. So, like, not committed at all is, yeah, I would vote liberal or I would vote conservative. I'm just not showing up this election. I don't care that much. And look, the CPC, 72% of CPC voters in the Angus Reid poll that shows the Liberals way ahead are definitely voting conservative. 22 are fairly certain they're going to vote conservative. 6% not very certain they're going to vote. And there's basically nobody saying they're not going to be voting. With the Liberals, 5% right off the top are not voting. They don't care. 7% are fairly uncertain if they're voting. 36% are fairly certain they'll vote Liberal. And 51% are definitely certain to be voting Liberal. The Conservatives have a extremely enthusiastic lead on the Liberals of 21%, even in the Angus Reid poll. And that Angus Reid poll is garbage. When I say it's garbage, it's not because, again, it has a result I don't like. It's because it shows them winning like 7 seats in Alberta. It shows them winning like 3 seats in Saskatchewan. Do you know what the chances of that are? Nothing. Are there seats in Calgary and Edmonton that the Liberals can win? Sure. If they absolutely overachieve, they can maybe win 3 or 4. That is if they overachieve. I think the average outcome is that the Liberals are either going to hold on to Skyview, McKnight, or Edmonton Centre. It's going to be one of the 3. Maybe so he wins in Southeast, but the fact that the guy did not actually resign as the mayor of Edmonton proves he's only doing this as basically a stunt to help the Liberals. He's running for them. He's not going to try too hard, but he has the Edmonton mayor with them, and that might help hold on to Edmonton Centre. But anyways, moving on to some other stuff, when you actually look at them, even in like Ontario, the Angus Reid poll shows the Liberals punching above like 50% in Toronto. I know that the NDP suck. At the end of the day, though, the NDP are always like a 25% party in Edmonton, and the Conservatives in that poll were at like 34%. So the Conservatives and NDP and Greens and even the PPC are all somehow underperforming in Toronto except the Liberals. What this looks like is that Angus Reid is just pulling Liberals on a sugar high and everyone else is taking the polls at a more normal rate. But because there are tons of Liberals in these samples, that's what he assumes is going to happen. Here's the thing with polling, too. You need to make assumptions to do good polls. It sounds wrong. Well, why are you assuming? Well, you got to assume because people don't answer polls at the same rates that they actually vote in. So if you have a sample where 59% of the people who vote in your poll are women, are you going to assume that 59% of people who are going to show up in election day are women? No, you reasonably will weight the women down to where they usually are at when it comes to turnout. And women actually do vote more than men, but just not, a 59 to a 41 ratio. It's more like 48 to 52 or 51 to 49, a little bit leaning more, elections tend to lean a little bit more female than male. So you do have to make those assumptions, but in all of these polls, when I look at their regionals, it's people like Angus Reid and others, assuming that the election is going to be like 34% or 40% people over the age of 60. No, people over the age of 60 do disproportionately vote more than people under the age of 60, especially younger people under the age of maybe 28. The problem is they're not going to, that's an overperformance over every other election, where they're assuming that it's tons and tons and tons of seniors showing up to vote liberal who are in fact a default liberal category. So that's how you have Frank Graves and Abacus, not Abacus. Abacus has actually been very clear. They also show the conservatives currently with a +3. Innovative research even shows the liberals leading by 1. But I think innovative research does good work. That last poll they put out, I think that their demographics were still a little bit too urban, but still, it was a good attempt to be accurate. But when you see Ecos, when you see Leger, when you see even Main Street coming out, and they are just assuming that the population that's voting this election is extremely college educated and much older, not really, not seeing it. In fact, this is the last thing I want to bring up here, is that in this Nanos poll, the conservatives are in fact winning every single age bracket except older voters. And this is how other pollsters have been trying to show the liberals ahead. Even this, it seems like a massive overpoll that people 60 years and older are going to vote 50% liberal. Yeah, maybe in certain regions, I don't think overall. But in the rest of the age categories, you have 40% people 18 to 29 voting conservative, 35% between 30 and 39, 38% between 40 and 49, and 43% between 50 and 59. So this 60 plus poll seems a bit odd to me, that suddenly, as soon as people go over the age of 59, everything starts changing. And this is even in the Nanos poll that's accurate. I think even in these more accurate polls, they have to fight back against what is a massive response bias and what is a massively default liberal older voting demographic who tends to be answering a lot of these polls and skewing them. But some pollsters, again, because they like the skewing, because maybe it gives the liberals artificial momentum, or maybe they're just genuinely bad at their jobs, are letting it seem like the liberal surge is never ending. Every surge ends. Every election, as soon as the election is called, things narrow. So when pollsters are showing the election start up and it's even surging more, the news cycle doesn't back that up. It exasperates me so much when the news cycle is actually pretty pro-conservative at the moment. Carney's messed up on a lot of fronts. He's ducking debates. He's been exposed for a lot of corruption and a lot of sort of like compromises that he has, or a lot of exposures he has with the CCP and whatnot. This has not been an amazing news cycle for Carney, yet some of these pollsters, you'd think that he saved a small child from drowning and Pierre Poilievre was seen kicking a puppy. Not happening. But anyways, that's it for me talking about these polls today. I'm going to be coming back as we get more polling data. And again, I'm not just trying to ignore polls because they show the liberals ahead. I'm ignoring polls that don't seem realistic. If I see a poll where the conservatives are at 48%, the NDP's at 21, and the liberals are at 34, you can guarantee I'm ignoring that one. If I see a poll where the Bloc Québécois are somehow only at 4%, I'm ignoring that one. Bloc are going to get 8. At least they could even get 9, especially with Carney ducking French debates. If I can see hallmarks of things that are off. Ecos shows sometimes, like the PPC at 10% in Saskatchewan. I know Saskatchewan's very conservative. Not going PPC, especially in the year 2025 when that party has zero momentum. Anyways, so that's it for me, guys. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all that great stuff if you've liked my election coverage so far, and I'll see you guys next time.